His battle plans are perfect. He's an intellectual, a philosopher, an artist, a tactician, a beautiful man, and a human above all else. He considers no one else a friend because no one can attain his heights. He's a lone chess piece on an empty board. His vision is all that matters. Emotions and love have no concern in Griffith's life. Yes, he does appear to care for people's livelihoods. When he goes to a ball, he's a perfect gentleman. He always says the right thing in the right situation, and he always gives his comrades a willing embrace. But for Griffith, this is all a means to an end. It's not something that he actually feels in his heart. It's something that he's doing to accomplish a goal. The one goal, the ultimate goal, attaining the kingdom. And nothing in life will ever change that goal. Even if he has to die and be reborn again, he will attain that goal. A mission that is for his sake. And by all accounts, that makes him a narcissist. And if we're going to talk about narcissism, we have to talk about the original myth of narcissism. And to do that, I want you to take a look at this painting by Salvatore Dali. It was a painting that was done in 1937, and it's called The Metamorphosis of Narcissus. Of course, this is based on the Greek myth of Narcissus. Now, I'm sure if you're a fan of Berserk, you're going to look at this painting and say to yourself that you see some key resemblances to the manga itself. But before we talk about those resemblances, I want to talk about the life of Narcissus. Now, to read this painting, we have to go from the top right to top left to bottom right. So with that said, let's start with the top right. Now, on the top right, we see a chessboard and a lone statue. Now, this is Narcissus, or in the case of Berserk, this is Griffith. He is the one piece on the chessboard, the only being in his life that matters to him. Because no one else can measure up to his expectations, and no one else can be considered a friend, no one else deserves a spot on that chessboard. Therefore, Griffith is alone. He is above the common man, and so the common man is nothing to him. It's as if they're squirming in a pitiful existence compared to his. Now, if you notice the position of the king here, he's not looking at the viewer, he's off looking in the distance. This is to convey that Narcissus/Griffith has a snobbish/elitist personality. He's too good to look at the viewer, and thus he's off looking in the distance at his aspirations. Now, while Narcissus was primarily focused on his own looks and beauty, you don't have to be solely focused on your physical attributes to be a narcissist. If you're primarily concerned with your own aspirations in life and have no regard for the common man, you're just the same. And like I said, even though Griffith showed compassion to others and he was a perfect gentleman, it became quite obvious later on that everyone was a mere sacrificial lamb for his one dream. Now, to the left of the chessboard, we see a bunch of women dancing around. These are the various nymphs that were interested in Narcissus. And in respect to Berserk, Griffith really showed no favor to anyone. Not to Casca, Charlotte, or any of the girls. Sure, he had sex with Charlotte, but he was merely using her as a means to an end. He wanted to attain that seat at the kingdom, and so to do so, he tried to force his way into the royal family. But he didn't do it out of love or compassion. And then we start getting to the meat of the picture itself. We see a man with like a shell on his head. His head is leaning on his knee, and he looks very depressed as he's looking in the water. Now, in the Greek myth of Narcissus, when he sees his reflection in the water, he becomes infatuated with it. But ultimately, he can't embrace himself. He can't have himself, but that's the only thing he ever wants. And so he's stuck forever gazing at his own reflection until the day he dies. And this is very similar to what happened to Griffith. When his body was desecrated in the Midland torture chambers, he could no longer attain his dream, and so he was in a pit of despair, and could do nothing more, in which he chased a childlike version of himself to the castle. But like Narcissus, it was in vain. He was left in a pool of water, and at the point of suicide. And what's really interesting about this as well is that you see that Narcissus has turned his back on the world. He's turned his back on the nymphs and everything that's going on around him. And that's the same thing Griffith did. He turned his back on the Band of the Hawk, on Guts, Casca, Judo, and Pippin. All that mattered to him was attaining the dream. And so like Narcissus, who was stuck at staring at his own reflection, Griffith was similarly trapped. He was imprisoned by his own dream. And the helmet that he wore on his head was a symbolic representation of how he was being trapped by his own mind. Just like Narcissus has a shell over his head, he is also trapped. And you could even relate this to Friedrich Nietzsche as well. Now, if you listen to my channel for any length of time, you know that I'm a big fan of Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy. The idea of creating a value system that accentuates the strength of the Ubermensch, the Superman, the higher men of society is something that I aspire to myself. But I believe there's a cautionary tale in this as well. Because if one becomes too singularly focused on attaining this higher worth, if you begin to look at everyone else as part of the herd and beneath yourself, you become disassociated with society. And eventually, if it goes on too long, you become disassociated with yourself, which is what I believe happened to Nietzsche later on in his life. That's not to say that one shouldn't follow the teachings of Nietzsche. It is a great reminder that we cannot cut ourselves off from society, from our family, our friends, or our loves. Yes, there are going to be the select few who rise to the top, the select few that create the major breakthroughs in society. But at the same time, it should be remembered that there were also a great number of people that helped out those select few. They created the bridge. They created the path that allowed that person to get where they are. And to not recognize that and not appreciate that is a grave error. And then we get to the most pivotal part of the image itself, and I'm sure if you're a Berserk fan, you'll notice that this looks a lot like the God Hand. And in the dead hand here, we see an egg that is cracking open and a single flower is blooming out. However, this is not a flower with vitality. No, this is a flower that is waning away. Yes, the flower is alive, but it's cold, has no passion or emotions. And like Griffith, who came from the egg, he was reborn with no passions, emotions, or feelings. He was cold on the inside. Yes, he was very beautiful, but underneath that beauty, he was an empty shell of a man. And that's because he lived his life that way. He didn't actually have feelings for others. He didn't actually feel regret, pain, or suffering. When others died in the battlefield, they died for his dream. He was always dead on the inside. It just became a reality when he became Femto. And I believe Mira drew a great inspiration from this image. I believe he saw the man sitting in the water, and that inspired him to draw Griffith sitting in the water like this as well. And I believe he saw this hand holding an egg, and that inspired him to draw the God Hand, with Griffith bursting out of the egg. There's also a dog behind the egg as well. A dog that is eerily reminiscent of Griffith. And this dog is eating a piece of flesh. And after the eclipse, what is Guts doing? He's killing apostles incessantly. He has become a harbinger of death. And even this shadow right here kind of looks like Void a little bit. I know that might be a little bit of a stretch, but you can see a lot of similarities in this one painting to many of the themes and images in Berserk. Now, what's really interesting about this as well is that Dali was a big fan of Sigmund Freud, and it's believed that Dali could enter this state of paranoid critical activity. Now, Sigmund Freud, along with Carl Jung, was one of the big proponents of the conscious and the unconscious mind, these two states of being that were completely separate from one another. Now, in Carl Jung's life, his whole process of individuation was bringing the unconscious mind to full consciousness, making it whole to become the individuated self. And when Dali made this painting, he believed he was entering a state of paranoid critical activity, a state of being in which he could use the rational mind, i.e. the conscious mind, and the irrational mind, the unconscious mind, and combine them into one. Essentially, he would be drawing the painting with his conscious mind with the influence of his unconscious mind. And he said to do so otherwise was impossible. Now, what's really interesting about this painting is if you look at the human sitting in the water, Narcissist, and the hand of God as it were, they're actually mirror images of each other. Just focus on it really closely and then you'll start to see that they're literally the same image with just different colors. And to see this sort of pattern, to be able to draw it in the way that he did, and to have it come out so beautifully and so accurately like this, makes one wonder if Dali really did speak with the unconscious mind, or have some sort of connection. It is known with current scientific research that the left and the right brains have their own sort of way of doing things. They can act independent of one another. And so to create this communication is not too far out of the realm. And what's really remarkable is that Dali creates this communication between the left and the right hemisphere, the rational and the irrational. But the juxtaposition is that he's drawing a painting about a man, Narcissus, who cannot create that connection. He has become divided from the irrational, just as Griffith has been divided from his irrational mind, the emotions and feelings as it were. And so this image portrays the dangers of narcissism. It portrays the dangers of separating yourself from your unconscious mind. Infatuation with oneself is truly a dangerous thing. Yes, it can get you very far in life. It can make you singularly focused, and you can accomplish many great things. But it may cut you off in ways that create dark clouds over your life that cannot be easily reconciled. One last piece of information, guys. Remember in the most recent chapters where Griffith created a maelstrom and this surprised Shirka? Well, what's a maelstrom? It's essentially a whirlpool. It draws stuff into it. And what does a narcissist do? It draws everything into itself. It's all about me and no one else. And you could definitely see this in how Griffith set up his kingdom, and how he's taken away Casca from Guts, and how he's running his life in general. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the flip side.